Welcome back. We're learning Rabbi Yonasan Steif's holy work of Mitzvos Hashem, practical guidance for every single human being. And what's the practical guidance in? God Almighty's divine, loving wisdom, guidance for every single human being, how to live in the smooth center lane of life. And we're going to start the day with a new section. But first, I wanted to address a few things in the news because everything that we see and happens around us is a lesson for us in the service of God Almighty. And particularly to understand, are we doing what we need to be doing? What is the lesson we could take? What are we contributing? Are we bringing to the world? Are we uplifting the world sufficiently? Are we, like it says, people translate that as to be the light unto the nations, the children of Israel, the light unto the nations, but it says it means to lighten up the nations, meaning to bring light, to bring uplift people to the awareness of God Almighty in throughout the world. So are we doing that? And we have to see that anytime something negative happens, we have to see that as a reflection on the incompletion of our work. It's not about beating ourselves up, but realizing more needs to be done. And what we've done till now has not been sufficient to bring the job to completion, that every single human being is uplifted from the spiritual slavery and the physical slavery of subjugation to false ideologies, to foreign, non-existent, imaginary powers, to create powers, to believe in powers in the world, the universe, believe in other human beings as the source of power, believe in themselves as the source of power. These are all things that are falsehoods that are actually, as we learned last time, parts of idolatry, connected to idolatry. We're going to learn starting today, the mitzvah of Megadif means to say the commandment not to subtract from God Almighty's power. The commandments relate to cursing God Almighty, but we're going to see that really to curse God Almighty is related to subtracting from his power. We'll get into that more later, where we ascribe a portion of what is God Almighty's power to some other source. So that is kind of like the corollary of the prohibition against idolatry. And there's many different ways a person could do that without thinking that he's actually transgressing the prohibition against idolatry. But what I do want to address is terrible things going on in the world. Particularly, for example, there was a shooting. 14-year-old boy in Georgia takes a gun and goes and shoots classmates and teachers. Terrible tragedy. And the tragedy is multifold. Tragedy is in both the fact that the victims, families that suffer, it's a terrible tragedy. It's murder. This is a prohibition of God Almighty's divine commandment. But the reason that we're not allowed to murder another human being is because we are told, and God Almighty continually reinforces that every single human being is created in God Almighty's divine image. That means that someone commits a murder, he has forgotten that the victim is created in God Almighty's divine image, but the murderer is also forgetting that he himself is created in God Almighty's divine image. That means in a lack of awareness of who this person, awareness of himself, awareness of who his peers were in school and who the teachers were and their families and everybody, that they are created in God Almighty's divine image. And the tragedy of all this is that this is not an issue of guns at all. In fact, I was speaking to a farmer, within the last 2 weeks, and he told me that when he was growing up as a child, he's now in his 70s, when he was growing up as a child, all the children would bring their guns to school. Children brought their guns to school because they would like to hunt on the way home. So there's not an issue of guns in school. It's not an issue of kids bringing guns to school. And the question is nothing about the guns. The question is, are the people grounded in the knowledge that God Almighty loves them, that God Almighty is taking care of them, and an understanding that their life is precious and the life of the other human being is precious and in God Almighty's eyes, even if you're momentarily not in the mood of appreciating your life and the other person's life, but you recognize that there's a giver of life that may determine who's precious, and the definition is by who's alive. That signifies the greatness of the other human being, and of yourself, and it's impermissible, forbidden to touch that life. So that's number one. Number one is we have to understand that it's nothing to do with the guns. It has to do with the state of the connection to God Almighty of each one of these people. And the second thing is, when there's a terrorist attack, a terrorist organization takes responsibility. And by taking responsibility, that's where they're able to accomplish their mission. When you take responsibility for what happens around you, you're able to advance your mission. And this terrible effect, this terrible attack over here that this kid murdered other kids is something that I need to take responsibility for. Meaning to say that I'm responsible for the fact that this child was not brought up and raised knowing that he's created in God Almighty's divine image. He did not internalize that. He did not walk around with a constant awareness of that. Someone has to take responsibility, and it's the responsibility of the children of Israel, the Jewish people, to take responsibility for the rest of the world. Abraham is called the father of the nations of the world. He has a fatherly care and love for the rest of humanity, for every single human being individually, not just in a general vague sense, but in an individual sense. So I take responsibility for this, what happened in Georgia, because I have not reached that child yet. And I think that that's when I take responsibility that propels me forward to do more, to reach more people, to see the urgency of it, and for everyone who's learning Torah with me to also take responsibility, because we're all responsible. We have an infinite responsibility. We have responsibility to reach every single human being, and each one of us has to work together to that. It doesn't absolve me of my responsibility, but I want you to see that and take upon yourself your responsibility. That's how we get traction in the world. That's how we get a change in the world and things move forward. So that's a really essential point to recognize when we see something in the news. You can't just shed a tear or many tears or say, oh, that's a terrible thing, or what direction is the world going into? How could such a thing happen? No, the reason it's happening is because I have to take responsibility for that happening. And that really leads to another point that we see confronting us. There's big news in the United States that a lady named Candace Owen that's speaking out against the Lubavitch Rebbe and taking snippets of videos and saying the Jew, accusing the Rebbe of Jewish supremacy and hating, God forbid, non-Jews and so forth. And it's a such a fundamental attack of a Amalek to want to make war against the children of Israel and to confuse the world, to try to prevent the world from receiving the message that the children of Israel have had self-sacrifice for thousands of years to carry the message of the greatness of every human being. But she's trying, and presumably innocently, she doesn't even understand what she's repeating from what she heard from other people. But what I want to address is what the video clip that she actually promotes, which is one where the Rebbe is saying that when the children of Israel, the Jewish people, when a Yid, Jew, takes upon himself the kingship of God Almighty on Rosh Hashanah, now we're in the time of Elul, we're preparing for the time of Rosh Hashanah when we crown God Almighty King, the entire universe, and also individually over our own lives, that brings blessing to the entire world. And he says that this makes the Jew the balabayas from the world. He becomes the master of the home. Literally, Baal Habayis is the word for master of the home. And she is using that, and particularly since there's a mistranslation of one of the words over there that the person who translated and put in the subtitles puts in the word control, he's using it to say that the Jews think they control the world and so forth. And the reality is what the Rebbe is bringing out, and the Rebbe is speaking about me when he says that a Jew is going to take upon himself the kingship of God Almighty. He's bringing benefit and blessing to the world, and he becomes the Balabai to the world. He becomes the master of the home. This is talking about responsibility. This is the master of the home is not able to go around, boss people around, and to control the people. That's not true kingship. The Balabayas is the one who takes responsibility for the entire situation, whatever it is, at the home. And if it's the world, when a Jew takes responsibility for the entire world, when he sees that there's a direct connection between his personal taking upon himself the kingship of God Almighty as his own king and the king for all of the entire humanity, and crowns God Almighty the king of the entire creation, then that brings blessing, and he is for the entire world. That Jew is taking responsibility for the well-being of every single human being. We have to bring to the world's attention the great merit of what the Rebbe is saying over here for the Jew to take this responsibility. The Rebbe is speaking in 770 Eastern Parkway, and he's speaking to these people that are assembled there to hear what he has to say, and he's urging them to take responsibility for the entire world for the benefit of the world. It will bring blessing when God Almighty is recognized in the world. then there's blessing, there's abundance, there's peace, there's harmony, there's health. All these things are felt in a person's life and a person's family and a person and the entire world as a whole. But when that's missing, then their world descends into chaos and shortage, God forbid, and appearances of shortage, and people begin to able to manipulate people. So our job is to stand up proudly and say, yes, I have the capability of taking on responsibility. And me taking responsibility for the well-being of the world by announcing, proclaiming that there is no king besides God Almighty, there is no power in existence besides God Almighty. This is a act of taking responsibility. Yes, I become the master of the situation, meaning to say, the master of the home, I am the one who's taking responsibility. And now the world is benefiting. What's the home? The home is the world. This is God Almighty's home that He is asking for a dear b'tachtonim. He's asking for us to create a dwelling place for Him. So instead of the person saying, what's going on in the world is beyond my control and I have nothing to do with it and I have no say in all the descent into chaos, the person says, no, it's not that I have control in other people. I have the ability to take responsibility and it connects the world to God Almighty, which is going to bring blessing and abundance to the entire world. And then the Rebbe says that the nations of the world, the people of the world, the non-Jews of the world are going to appreciate the Jew for taking that responsibility, for connecting the great and limited creator to this simple, humble world filled with wonderful human beings created in His God Almighty's divine image. So that's what the Rebbe is bringing out. He's urging the listener, who in that moment he's speaking to the Jew. He's saying, take responsibility for the well-being of the world. You're responsible, and it starts with your accepting upon yourself the yoke of heaven, the kingship of God Almighty, which is the job of every single human being to take upon himself the kingship of heaven of God Almighty. That's a job, but the Rebbe is saying that the Jew can't say, "Oh, that." That's the other person's problem. He has to say, no, I take responsibility for the well-being of the world, just like Abraham did, Yitzchok and Isaac and Jacob. And Moses, our teacher, to make sure that the entire world knows the message of God Almighty. This is what we have to understand. So her publicizing this and trying to use it as a weapon to try to discredit, God forbid, should be an encouragement to actually take that responsibility. The reason that she's walking around in this state of confusion, that she's attacking the message that's meant to uplift humanity. She's attacking the people that are here to uplift humanity. She's attacking the urge of the Lubavitch Rebbe that every person should take upon themselves responsibility to uplift the world. That her status self, that she's confused about that and can be misled by other people who seek to attack the children of Israel and by extension attack all of humanity, to keep every single human being in the dark about their own greatness. The fact that she's able to be confused about this and go out in a public stage to try to attack the children of Israel, attack the leader of the generation, attack the Lubavitch Rebbe and everyone who's following his teachings and inspired by his teachings to go and uplift the world. The fact that she could do this is a byproduct. It is a direct outcome of our failure to reach her first with the message, how great she is, that she's created in God Almighty's divine image. That then she would express appreciation to the Jew for reaching her and uplifting every single human being. So I have a thing that if we take this responsibility, then there will be abundance for the world and there will be appreciation for the Jew from the non-Jew. If she's not appreciating what the Jew is doing here, it's a reflection of the degree to which we are accepting God Almighty's kingship, to accepting the degree to it's a reflection of the degree to which we are taking responsibility to bring God Almighty awareness of God Almighty into the world. It's a reflection on the degree to which we are taking responsibility for the world. In the absence of that, she could then be convinced to play with the words to turn it into an attack on the children of Israel because she is not experiencing and she's not seeing that what these words really mean in her own personal life is that there's some human being that cares about her unconditionally because the Jew, recognizes that she is created in God Almighty's divine image, and therefore that's an expression of God Almighty's unconditional love for her and for every human being, and therefore the Jew takes responsibility to make sure that message is a part of the awareness and the constant awareness of every single human being. And so therefore, we have to take responsibility for what's happening. It's not about missing what she has to say. She is raising an issue that comes in the vacuum created by not following what the Rebbe says. So therefore, we have to increase the expansion of the message, what the Rebbe is saying, to ourselves to make sure that we understand that we have to take the responsibility and then come to the world and say, and coming to the world does not mean it's necessarily just making proclamations and global proclamations and putting ads in the paper. It's on an individual basis, coming to every single non-Jew, saying, I am here, I am put into this world to be here, to be to take responsibility, to make sure God is known in this world. That is my job as one of the children of Israel, one of the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, one of the students of Moses, our teacher. And I take responsibility for your well-being, both spiritually and physically. This is the job of the Jew, and I'm proud to do that. I'm proud to be here to do that. And through that, not only do we inspire the Jewish people to take responsibility, but then we show by example to the non-Jewish people, children of Noach, which is every single human being, to be able to take that responsibility, to be inspired to take that responsibility, to not write off any single human being, and to continue to realize, like the Lubavitch Rebbe says, that even the greatest opponents of the children of Israel will become the greatest ally as soon as the non-Jew recognizes the sincerity of the children of Israel and fulfilling God's purpose in this world and taking the responsibility, self-sacrifice to the point of being willing to die for this mission, to bring to every single human being the knowledge of God Almighty, that even the greatest opponents of the children of Israel will become the greatest proponent of this mission to uplift every single human being, to bring every human being into the service of God Almighty, means to say that every human being will recognize that there's nothing besides God Almighty, will be afraid of no other human being, will not be afraid of anything in the existence, will only be seeing the vision of God Almighty for his greatness and be recipient of the abundance, the unlimited abundance that God Almighty lovingly intends and wants to bestow upon every single human being to increase the world's population from 8 billion to 80 billion. This is the message. This is the vision. This is God Almighty's vision. And this is what we have the special merit of being able to accomplish. Okay, there's a comment up here. Someone's pointing out over here that I'll read this thing. We have the same kind of misinformation campaign here in Germany about being the quote unquote dark sect behind all the evil politicians, end quote, all grounding in one German quote unquote history researcher who claims to have dissected Tanya and came to negative conclusions. The common opinion, even on German Telegram channels that call themselves as critical toward the official narrative, is Abad is behind it all. And as the person who put in the comment says, Amalek is doing an amazing job too. Yes, what more important mission would Amalek have than to be able to dissuade the world from hearing God Almighty's message by blaming the world's problems on people who are committed to the Lubavitch Rebbe's and the Torah's message to uplift every single human being and bring people out of slavery. Then now the Amalek which is the slave master of trying to enslave humanity, Amalek, as it's being exposed, is blaming the slavery on Chabad. So, that's part of the tragedy, and they'll point to, of course, that the Chabad rabbi shakes hands with this world leader and shakes hands with that world leader, because the job of an emissary of the Lubavitch Rebbe is to reach every single human being, and even the human being, such as a person who's steeped in the greatest misinformation and the greatest dedication to the wrong purposes, a shliach of the Lubavitch Rebbe, and Moses himself went and spoke to Paro. Moses was commanded by God Almighty to speak to Paro, to go and influence him to change his ways and to change from denying God Almighty to serving God Almighty and to letting the children of Israel go to bring freedom for the entire Egyptian people. So, you could have some Egyptian slave master snickering and saying that really Moses was working hand in hand and really behind Paro, and because you see he's going to these meetings with Paro and he's in Paro's palace, and that is the potential for a person to do that, God forbid. But think about the terrible tragedy of that, because Moses is opening the door for everyone to be redeemed from slavery, and the people saying, "No, see, Moses is part of the slavery enslavement." And the fact of the matter is, no point to his upbringing, and he was brought up in Paro's palace, and all kinds of ways you could besmirch, God forbid, Moses and his motivations and his connections and all kinds of stuff like that. And people will stay locked in the prison as a result. They'll stay locked in the slavery because they don't want to go near Moses. They'll stay as Paro's slave. And that's exactly what's happening over here. People are waking up to seeing different entanglements of and tangling and aspects of the attempt to enslave humanity, and then they say, "Oh," get distracted and run after the idea that it's the children of Israel that are responsible. It's the wealthy Jews. It's Chabad. Anyway, in order to distract people from the reality that there is a message that has to get to every single human being, and that is coming from Mount Sinai, from Moses, our teacher. And he commanded us, he instructed us to have an obligation to bring every single human being to know that there's nothing besides God Almighty. So let's spend a few minutes now to delve into Rabbi Steif here, his holy work, which is going to bring clarity to the situation and bring every single human being to recognize there's nothing besides God Almighty, and the intensity and the sincerity of the children of Israel, that he put himself into this holy work to bring every human being to recognize that there's nothing besides God Almighty, and how God Almighty loves every single human being and wants the best for every human being, and has sent the children of Israel to bring this message to them. Start at the top of the page. It says Mitzvos Hashem, commands, the loving divine commands of God Almighty. Mitzvah base, the second commandment, says over here in the middle of the page, over here, Mitzvah base. And then it says over here, Shin Ayin Gimel, page 373. Mitzvah base, the second commandment, Aparaz Magadif. The second commandment is to be a commandment against being Magadif. And what we're going to see over here is that the word Magadif means to hollow out. So if you imagine that you want to take a piece of wood and you want to make a bowl from it, then what you would do is you would start carving out that bowl. You would bit by bit, sliver by sliver, start to carve it out. So Magadif means to hollow something out. So this concept of cursing God Almighty is called Magadif. It means to it's so a person says, "Oh, okay, they're going to curse God." What they're really saying is that they are unhappy with something that is happening in their life. They are denying that the authority of God Almighty. They're denying the omnipresence. They're denying the total power of God Almighty. That He is the only power in existence. So we have to understand that even a person says that they're not violating the commandment, they're not cursing God Almighty. God forbid. As we're going to see, we use the term blessing God Almighty because we don't like to talk about cursing God. So we say in a euphemism that person's blessing God, but we're referring to the cursing of God Almighty. God forbid. So even though I'm not saying cursing God Almighty, any time that you are ascribing power to something else, even the subtlest way, even the simplest way, even the most refined way, then that is Magadif. That is hollowing out. That is scraping away at the absoluteness in your mind of the power of God Almighty. So let's go into the first paragraph over here. Siman Nun Beis, chapter 52. We're up to here. Lab de Birkas Hashem. This is the prohibition against the blessing of the name, which is a euphemism for referring to the cursing of the name, cursing God Almighty. God forbid that anyone should do such a thing. You should ever hear such a thing. Chinuch Ayin, this is the Chinuch, this is 70, number 70 in the listing of the commandments, God Almighty's divine commandments in the Torah, according to the way they appear in the Torah. Ben Neach Musa Shelo Levarach Hashem, a human being, every human being, a child of Noah, which is every human being, is prohibited, is warned not to bless the name. And again, I'll say it again and again so that everyone understands it. That's the euphemism not to curse God Almighty. We're saying that, meaning to say, Shelo Lekalo, meaning to say not to curse. Tiksiv, as it says in the book of Leviticus, chapter 24. Let me just share the screen on this. And it says, El b'nei Yisrael tadaber leimor ish ki yakalal elakav nasa chatoy. And to the children of Israel you shall speak, saying, any man who blasphemes his God shall bear his sin. So go back over here. We see the Darshinan. This is the quote of the verse. But Darshinan says in the Talmud in Sanhedrin, Lamed Vav, it says, 36th page on the first side, Ma Talmud loimer ish ish. Why does the Torah say, Moses is speaking to the children of Israel, but it says ish ish. It says the man. the wording is man that curses, that blasphemes his God. Why does it say, it says the Talmuds, the Torah sages say, why does it say man? Rabbi sa'akum shemushayim al birkas Hashem b'Yisrael. It includes those that service idols, that they are warned. Meaning to say, any human being, whether they're a ben Neach who's not worshiping idols, or even a human being that worships idols, he's also commanded not to against on birkas Hashem. He should not curse God Almighty, just like a Jew is. And this is a fascinating point I just want to draw out over here, that it says to include the idolater, because you might say, listen, what does it matter if an idolater is already worshiping idolatry? What does it matter if he curses God? Because this is a separate commandment. Every human being is prohibited against this, no matter how low he's sunken in his confusion. He's prohibited from cursing God Almighty. And the prohibition to the children of Israel not to curse the name. I keep saying over here, it's like Hashem, not to bless the name, but this is a euphemism. It comes on the verse that says, the book of Exodus, chapter 22 and verse 27, Elohim lo tikala v'nasi b'amcha lo t'se'er. And you shall not curse a judge, neither should you curse a prince among your people. And it says over there, this is being translated as a judge, because Elohim could be referring to a human being who is a judge, can't curse the judges, but it's also referring to God Almighty. And he brings the Mechilta, one of the collections of the teachings of the Torah stages. It says in the Mechilta Sham Sanhedrin, and it says in the Mechilta in Exodus 22 on verse 27, and also in the Talmud Sanhedrin on page Nun Vav, in the 56th page, in the first side, Shazehu Azhar Levarach Hashem. This is referring to the prohibition not to curse God Almighty. God forbid. So we'll continue next week, but I wanted to get a good start on this. We're resuming from our summer break, and because the urgency of this is that we have to reach every single human being, we're going to see, as we go through these chapters, greater and greater detail. Please send in your questions. We'll have more time next week for questions. And the main thing here is that all the attempts to try to disparage the children of Israel, or any part of the children of Israel that's following a legitimate path in the Torah, is attempt to cause us to retract, to feel frightened, and then to withdraw from this, bringing the message of God Almighty to the entire world. And our job is not to be in any way intimidated. In fact, to be intimidated is like Magadef. It's when we say, oh my gosh, there's people out there saying this. Let us retract. Let us become more quiet. We are denying the awesome all-powerfulness of God Almighty, as if they have some sort of power. And we are also provoking and increasing the problem by denying the world the message. So it's interesting, the Rebbe says that if the children of Israel will, and each Jew will accept upon himself God Almighty, and therefore he takes responsibility for the world, and he becomes he's like the master of the home. He's able to uplift everyone in his home. The world is his home. He's able to uplift everyone and bring everyone to abundance. That everyone's going to appreciate the Jew. One can suggest that the corollary is also true, that if a Jew is not doing that, there is a lack of that experience of abundance and God Almighty's love in the world. And then there is a lack of appreciation. There's actually resentment towards the children of Israel, because who else is there to blame in this situation than the fact that the Jew hasn't taken responsibility. The Jew hasn't brought the message of hope to the entire world. So that, my friends, is the lesson for us. We have to get out there. We are the masters of the situation. Each one of us is the master of the situation. We are the master God Almighty has given us by divine gift to the children of Israel, and to every single human being, the ability to help set the course of humanity, set the course of the world, that there should be abundance in the world, that there should be goodness in the world, there should be peace in the world. And that starts with me taking responsibility as a Jew, as a proud Jew, to take responsibility for the well-being of the world, to take responsibility to bring God Almighty into my life, into your life, that every single human being with a great smile and a great joy is going to welcome the coming of the redemption, the righteous Redeemer, Mashiach, whose job is to be an advisor to the entire world, to help the entire world, uplift the entire world, the service of God Almighty, the rebuilding of the holy temple in the holy city on the holy temple mount, in the holy city, in the holy land, for the service of every single human being to come and have a place to gather, to join together with one shoulder, with one common, intense dedication to the service of God Almighty. That is something that we are all looking forward to and praying for and expecting right now. Thank you very much for being here. And God willing, God Almighty should continue to bless you, spread the message, invite more people to come, spread these videos. There's only one solution, that is to bring the message of God Almighty's message of hope to every single human being. God Almighty bless you all. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rabbi. You too.
Thank you. Bye now.